So, what we have here is the, or my personal 2012 Les Paul Deluxe. Now, this one is nothing special. This one has a 2012 model in every sense. It has the mini humbuckers with the adjustable pole pieces, and they are actually adjusted flat. So I don't know if somebody, I thought these things originally came with them adjusted for compensation, but these have always been adjusted flat, and I kind of like the way they sound, so I haven't really ever jumped on yeah, I think I'm going to go ahead and change that bandwagon. It does have the most annoying locking deal ever, and it just absolutely does work, but it's annoying because you have to literally almost be looking at it to be able to get the actual cable out. Of course, it's got the regular knobs, the correct-ish script, though it does not have the big 70s style deluxe headstock. Now, that said, it's not supposed to be a 70s tribute. It is supposed to be a modern interpretation of the deluxe, which realistically came about in the 70s. Now, there's people that'll be upset, that were kind of upset with these guitars because they didn't have a lot of the same appointments, didn't have the volute on the back. There's a lot of people that really hated on these. This particular one exists because I sold my 77, which did have a volute, but not a real serious volute. So it was really, those were in the sticker generation for the serial numbers, so it's really hard to check exactly where stuff came from. At least it was back in the 90s. I mean, in 1996, or maybe it was early 97, it was sometime when it was cold. I was wearing a jacket when I got there. And in Texas, you don't generally wear a jacket in the Houston area unless it's between about December 15th and March 15th. So it's somewhere in that range between 96 and 97. These, a buddy of mine called me from a little guitar store. It's a secondhand store outside of Friendswood, Texas. And that store belonged to a friend of ours, which I think the family name was Townsend, but I think they called it like Little Red Barn Music or something like that. But they had a 77 Les Paul Deluxe Goldtop in the store. They had just taken it in as a consignment. And the person that owned it did not know much more than it was a Les Paul Deluxe Goldtop. So with that in mind, they didn't want a whole lot for it. I believe $800 or $850 is what they were asking for it. And that was a pretty good bit of money for a 20-ish year old Les Paul at the time. They, like I say, the ability and knowledge of tracking serial numbers was not nearly as good back then as it is now. The databases didn't exist. There was no online, setup for you to be able to go, oh, you know what? Let me go look at this. And when you called Gibson, they weren't really interested in talking to you about that kind of stuff. But anyway, so we tracked it down after I went ahead and dealt with them a little bit. I talked him to $800 out the door. And so for $800 out the door after taxes and everything, I picked up a 77 Les Paul Deluxe that I didn't know was a 77 Les Paul Deluxe. I just knew it was a Les Paul Deluxe, and I liked the way it sounded when I plugged it in. The electronics were scratchy though. I mean, you could tell that the pots definitely had some wear and tear on them. So I took it to a friend that had worked on a couple of my acoustics at the time, named Kevin Perry, and he owns a place called Great Southern Music. And Kevin Perry is a master luthier that just happens to own a guitar shop. And with that in mind, he said, yeah, I can get that fixed up for you. So he did. He took it apart, found a bunch of dirty wiring, at least one cold solder that was creating an open and close situation on the bridge pickup. But at the end of the day, most of what he did was just clean up and resolder stuff. The wiring was really good. And when I picked that guitar up, it had a completely different sound, and it was absolutely worth the money I paid for it. It was about $200 to Kevin, maybe $250 worth of work to Kevin. So by the time it was all said and done, I was right at the $1,000 to $1,100, somewhere between $1,000 and $1,100 worth of investment in the guitar, and it just played great. A couple, 3 years later, I was at an open mic night in Austin playing, I believe it was the Blind Pig, because they had a few of those at different places, and I was frequently down on 6th Street hanging out. And a guy walked up to me and said, "Man, I really like that Les Paul Deluxe you have." I said, "Thanks." He goes, "Would you be willing to sell it?" And I said, "Well, it would have to be at my price, and I'm pretty sure you don't want to pay." He said, "Well, tell me what you want for it, and let's talk." I said, "I'd like $2,500 for it." He said, "I'll give you $2,250. And at that moment in time, I thought, I can go down and buy me another one. So I took it, because I only had about $1,100 total, including strings and everything, in the guitar. So it was double my money. Well, guess what? Gibson didn't make that guitar at that moment in time anymore, so I couldn't go down and just buy another one. It was another 10 years before they started really pushing the Les Paul Deluxe again, and this is one of those. Now, it doesn't have the pancake construction. It doesn't have a lot of the, what I would say is anatomically correct setups, but it does have, I think mine had waffle back tuners, and these are Kluson Deluxes, which is actually an upgrade in my world, because these are super responsive and super comfortable. Also, it doesn't have the big paddle style headstock, which, again, either love it or hate it. So, I really do. It looks so much like my Deluxe that I was enamored with this one when I found it and decided to buy it. Now, I will say this. Look at this. The quality control on this is, you can't make this switch be exactly straight up and straight down. It always flips like this. Even if you move it and hold it in position, it will work its way back around to this. And I'm not sure if that's something that was the way it was put in there. We're going to take a look at it here in a little bit. But that's been something that has bothered me about this guitar the entire time I've owned it, because I am a perfectionist. I think things are supposed to look a certain way. So when it doesn't, it's like, what on earth is wrong with this guitar? But it's not really anything wrong with the guitar. The switch works just fine. Everything works. The actual pots and everything are great, but it's got, for some reason, this particular one has a sound that really does channel the original 70s model. And the bridge pickup is really no different. I know I've got it turned down. I think I have mine. Let's see, that's 10. So I keep it on 8 because it bites, because mini humbuckers tend to be really bitey. And that's really great if you're looking for a Stratty sound. And there's a lot of Strat stuff that I play on this guitar. But of course, now it's going to act up. But this guitar, like I say, has a really bitey bridge. And a glass smooth rhythm. So, but that turns into a really great crunchy sound. Presuming, of course, it's in tune. Give us a second. Let's try that one again. But bottom line, oh, bridge pickup, same riff. So the bottom line for this guitar is that this was a spirit catching guitar, and it had a lot of the same sound that the reworked electronics did in my 77 Deluxe. And because of that, I fell in love. And I don't know if it's just this one, but these guitars, I think, got a lot of hate back in the day for, I mean, this is a 10-year-old guitar now. So this guitar got some pretty good hate when it was new from people that were traditionalist about Les Paul Deluxe, and to this day probably still get a pretty good out. But the woods on it are beautiful. I mean, there's some figuring in here that has a little bit of movement, and you can't really tell it because we're not in sunlight, but I'll try to capture it a little bit later. But like I say, this guitar really does have a lot of the capture. Now, next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the covers off the back to see what's going on with this guy if there's something that I can do to fix it. Now, I don't know that I'm ever going to actually be able to fix it. I think it's always going to be just a little bit off. I think there's never going to be a moment where it's exactly upright, because I've fixed that 2 or 3 times, and the actual switch will rotate around and the poker chip will stay still. I don't have any explanation for that other than it wants to be the way it is. So let's take a look at it and see if we can figure out what's inside of the electronics in the back, and then, like I say, maybe a little bit more play. So I'm going to start off with this one because I was surprised by what I found in here. I didn't really think about where or how long the PCB systems had been going on, but this one really is like I am very much used to on, I believe it's my what is that one? Mine is a traditional. It has the old school pots and everything in it, and we've seen that when we compared it to the 2007 Les Paul Custom. But this one has the switching in it. Has the, or it doesn't have like switching. It has the actual printed circuit board. And I'm surprised by that because I didn't ever really think much about that. The setup on it is very modern. And the sound, everything, I mean the pots, like I say, the pots are all, they're not CTS branded or anything. I'm trying to figure out if they have any kind of branding on them at all, and it doesn't seem like they have anything other than Gibson written on them. There's like something written on there, I can't exactly make it out, but so these are Gibson pots, but that's a absolute surprise printed circuit board setup on there, so that's unique. Now going over here, what we've got is exactly what you would think it is, which is the old style switching circuit. I mean, the switch for the act, rhythm and treble. Now, that looks like a normal deal, and I have swiveled that 2 or 3 times, and I just don't feel like I'm going to do it anymore. I'm just going to let it be however it's going to be, and we'll call it a day. But that's something that I think is really unique, is that you've got that in there. I've never taken that off until just now, so that's an interesting discovery. But it really does make sense, since this was the first generation of what became the robot tuners in 2015, right, or somewhere in that era. But these, you know, like I say, that's a definite different than I was thinking it was going to be for this control pots. And those pots, like I say, I can't even make out what kind of, you know, rating they have on them or anything, because they're just so, the writing is so nondescript. I'll try to shed some more light on it and see if I can figure out what it is before we start doing the last talking about and demonstration on this one. So after some digging on the information on that setup, those pots are actually 300K pots in the volumes and 500K pots in the tone. And when I looked back at them after running the serial numbers that I could see on there, you can make it out in this faint little stamping on them. So they're 300K and then 500K Gibson pots, but just something I've never seen. I've always seen the round style or the like CTS style pots for the modern switching. I've never seen anything like those before. So probably a normal thing for this era, but I personally have never seen one. So I thought that was kind of interesting about this guitar. But this guitar really does play and channels the feeling of, I mean, even just playing it without any volume turned up. it resonates really well for an electric guitar played acoustically. But anyway, so this is it. 2012 Gibson Les Paul Deluxe, not like a 70s tribute or anything like that version, just the actual like modern day version of a deluxe. No reissue, no specific, not a pancake body, nothing else. Has the crazy little connector that holds the cable in that you have to push on while holding your mouth at just the right angle and standing on one leg to be able to unplug. The back of this one has some really nice wood grain on it. I think that most of them had that, from what I can tell from a few of the pictures that I looked at online before deciding to make this video. They all pretty much had a very similar appearance to them, but the gold top on this one is just perfect. It's beautiful. It's everything that I thought there was some finish checking on the 77 that this one I hope will eventually get. But even now, when I open this case up, it still smells like the wax, the nitro finish, man. It has a smell. You have a certain smell that you expect when you open up a case from a Gibson USA model guitar, and this one does that. I like the way that feeds back. I don't know why. This guitar just makes you want to play stuff that feels different. All right, till next time.